What if everything you learned about the origin of civilization was only a carefully chosen part of history? From the very first school lessons, we are led to believe in a linear timeline with no room for detours or enigmas. But in 1936, in the frozen heart of the Himalayas, a quietly censored episode seems to have challenged this order. Unofficial reports mention the discovery of an underground entrance linked to ancestral symbols and astronomical knowledge that officially should not have existed at that time. Why does no one talk about this? What could be so controversial that it forced global institutions to erase traces of a portal that would connect humanity, the cosmos, and hidden knowledge? If this door truly exists, we are not only talking about stone and ice, but about a revelation capable of rewriting our view of alternative history. Imagine having access to a secret hidden for almost a century, a secret that could bring quick answers to questions that have always been denied to you. Curious to find out why this enigma was buried in the silence of the elites and what exactly might be behind that door. For centuries, the official versions of history have been presented as unquestionable truths, shaping humanity's collective perception. However, documents and discoveries indicate that much of these accounts ignore fundamental pieces that do not fit into the dominant narrative. One of the most intriguing cases is the discovery that occurred in 1936 in the remote Himalayas, mentioned in reports from British and Tibetan military expeditions, but never incorporated into official historical records. Why would an event of such magnitude have been silenced? There are records from British colonial archives, now preserved in the British Library Archive, that show unusual troop movements in restricted access regions precisely in the same year. These movements coincide with unverified reports from explorers who claimed to have found an underground entrance with anomalous features. What could be hidden in such a place to justify decades of silence? It would not be the first time that uncomfortable evidence was erased. In 1909, for example, the Arizona Gazette published an article about an alleged discovery of underground ruins with Oriental symbols in the Grand Canyon in the United States, shortly after visits by Smithsonian agents. Curiously, no official document from the institution confirmed the finding. But the case still fuels debates of investigative conspiracy to this day. Another parallel appears in 1922 when excavations in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt found evidence of sealed passages near the tomb of Tutankhamun. Records from independent archaeologists mention that entire areas were sealed off and restricted, without clear justification, raising hypotheses about forbidden archaeology suppressed by greater interests. Could these patterns of concealment be mere coincidence or signs of a global censorship network? When we add to the scenario the fact that 17th century Tibetan maps, preserved in the Hemis monastery, already indicated mysterious passages in the sacred mountains, the puzzle becomes even more intriguing. After all, how could peoples from such different eras report similar structures without apparent contact? Documents confirm that such maps exist, but the meaning of their markings remains under debate. Some researchers argue that there is a direct connection between these records and ancient knowledge deliberately hidden and shared among civilizations. If the official versions ignore such connections, how many other fragments of ancestral wisdom are being erased from our collective memory? And more, if a portal was truly discovered in 1936, why would it have been kept secret precisely during that period of global conflict? What could change in our understanding of civilization, censored science, and mysterious astronomy if this forgotten piece were revealed to the public? Reports from British and Tibetan expeditions during the 1930s describe a peculiar episode that occurred in 1936 when explorers linked to military missions recorded the discovery of an underground entrance in the Himalayan mountains. Official sources never mentioned this episode, but documents preserved in private archives of British Raj officers suggest that there was immediate censorship and orders of silence on the matter. Why would records of such magnitude have been erased from history? Unverified accounts mention that the explorers were instructed to halt any disclosure after the discovery of unusual inscriptions near the entrance. A parallel can be found in the 1947 case in Roswell, when the United States Army initially announced the capture of a flying disc, but hours later retracted, claiming it was only a weather balloon. The pattern is the same, releasing something extraordinary and then suffocating the information. Another related case occurred in 1932 when miners in the San Pedro Mountains in the United States claimed to have found a small human mummy in a sealed cave. The artifact was even displayed in local museums, but soon disappeared after alleged intervention from scientific institutions. Why do phenomena that could alter humanity's perception of itself disappear or get officially denied? In the case of the Himalayas, there are records in the Indian Office records of unusual logistical movements in the Ladakh region, including the presence of military engineers in areas where no declared operations existed. Some researchers argue that these actions were linked to the alleged entrance discovered. The silence that followed raises even more questions. If it was just a natural formation, why the need for censorship? If there really was a non-natural structure, who was interested in concealing its existence? The 1936 finding, still treated today as a rumor in investigative conspiracy circles, connects directly to the pattern of concealing discoveries that could reveal an alternative history of humanity. Could we be facing one of the most significant hidden discoveries of the 20th century, deliberately erased to maintain the order of official versions? And if that entrance was in fact a trace of ancestral wisdom that could redefine the origin of civilization? Who had the authority in 1936 to decide what humanity could or could not know? In the years following the Second World War, part of the British Army's documents went through a declassification process. And between 1950 and 1952, curious records emerged about movements in remote areas of the Himalayas during the 1930s. These files, preserved at the National Archives in Kew, London, confirm the presence of military units in zones that, officially, were never part of operations of strategic interest. Some excerpts mention inspections of caves and non-natural structures observed near mountain passes without further explanation. Why were such reports kept secret for almost 2 decades? There are precedents that reinforce the pattern of concealment. In 1942, during the Burma campaign, internal reports mentioned ruins covered by jungle, described as aligned with astronomical precision, but no official mention made it into the final reports. Another comparable case occurred in 1956, when the Soviet Army conducted expeditions in the Pamirs, a mountain range neighboring the Himalayas, and internal reports obtained after the fall of the USSR indicated that stone structures shaped like circular portals were inspected by military engineers, but declared to be natural formations in the public versions. In the British case, the technical language found in the declassified reports raises doubts. Terms such as geological anomaly of possible human interference or structures not attributed to known local activities appear in documents dated 1936 and 1937. Why would military officers make records so specific if there was nothing beyond ordinary rocks? Terms such as geological anomaly of possible human interference or structures not attributed to known local activities appear in documents dated 1936 and 1937. Why would military officers make records so specific if there was nothing beyond ordinary rocks? If we compare with cases of forbidden archaeology, such as the reports from the French mission in 1934 that found strange symbols near caves in Lhasa, we see the same logic of technical records without further detail, followed by decades of silence. Could we be facing a coordinated concealment network among different governments and institutions? What would explain the secrecy maintained until the 1950s, when part of these documents came to light? Some researchers argue that these reports were merely unimportant observation notes, But others point out that the redacted excerpts and missing sections are clear signs of deliberate censorship. If military files confirm movements and describe unusual structures, to what extent can official versions be considered reliable? What information still remains classified in folders not released to the public? And above all, why did the greatest empires of the 20th century show so much interest in mountain passes that, in theory, offered no strategic relevance? Independent researchers who analyzed documents and reports about the alleged entrance discovered in the Himalayas in 1936 highlight an intriguing point. The inscriptions found near the underground structure present symbols similar to those used by ancient civilizations such as the Sumerians and the Akkadians, dated more than 4,000 years ago. These parallels were noted in comparative studies carried out by alternative historians in the 1970s, when some fragments of drawings copied by British explorers were revealed in unofficial publications. How would it be possible for inscriptions identical or very close to cuneiform to appear in one of the most isolated places on the planet? The same type of mystery had already been recorded in 1924 when the French archaeologist Henri de Genouillac found similar symbols in caves in Anatolia, which were later classified as inconclusive and removed from academic discussions. Another case occurred in Peru when the so-called Ica stones, controversial and considered forgeries by part of the scientific community, displayed inscriptions of advanced astronomy and beings coexisting with humans. Even with the contestation, many scholars argue that the volume and repetition of the images raised doubts about the true origin of this knowledge. In the case of the Himalayas, British documents do not officially confirm the existence of such inscriptions, but unverified reports from Tibetan explorers mention symbols carved into rocks associated with ancient Buddhist traditions that speak of celestial gates. This pattern of similarities connects directly to forbidden archaeology, an area in which records of distant cultures seem to share the same symbolic code. Could we be facing a global network of ancestral knowledge that was systematically erased from official history? And if such symbols really existed, why were they omitted from the declassified military reports? Some researchers argue that these connections are the result of coincidence or forced interpretation, but the repetition of patterns on different continents suggests something deeper. How can we explain, for example, that symbols similar to Sumerian ones were reported in the Himalayas, thousands of kilometers away, in a region that would never have had contact with Mesopotamia? Could we be facing a fragment of ancestral wisdom preserved in secret that resurfaces only in hidden discoveries like this? If the alternative history that connects Sumer, the Andes, and the Himalayas is true, what else may have been concealed by major institutions over time? Among the most enigmatic elements related to the alleged entrance in the Himalayas is the connection with ancient astronomical records preserved in Tibetan monasteries. 17th century maps, kept in the Hemis Monastery and mentioned in catalogues of the National Library of India, show precise alignments between certain points in the mountains and stars such as Sirius and Orion. The most curious aspect is that the location where British explorers reported the underground entrance in 1936 coincides with one of these points highlighted in the records. How could monks from centuries ago know, with such accuracy, celestial positions that would require advanced instruments? It is not the first time that ancient maps have revealed mysterious astronomical knowledge. The famous Piri Reis map, dated 1513, showed precise details of the Antarctic coast without ice, something modern science only managed to confirm with satellite images in the 20th century. Another intriguing parallel is found in the alignments of megalithic monuments such as Stonehenge in England and Nabta Playa in Egypt, both connected to stellar cycles that officially should not have been understood by civilizations that ancient. In the Tibetan case, some researchers argue that the maps are merely symbolic representations, But independent astronomers who analyzed the records in 1978 confirmed that the markings coincide with real coordinates in the sky, especially related to solstice events. Could it be a coincidence that the entrance discovered in 1936 was precisely at one of these aligned points? What else might these records be revealing about mysterious astronomy and the knowledge of past civilizations? If we take into account alternative theories, such as the one defended by historian Charles Hapgood about impossible maps based on much older sources, it is plausible to think that ancestral peoples had access to advanced astronomical information that was deliberately erased. Why have such documents, despite being cataloged, never been properly studied by major academic institutions? Was it a conscious choice to avoid questions about the official timeline of civilization? If the entrance in the Himalayas was indeed built in alignment with specific stars, this suggests not only technique, but also a greater purpose, perhaps tied to an intentional cosmic connection. Could we be facing yet another piece of a global network of ancestral wisdom that transcends continents and eras? And above all, what secret lies behind structures that seem to obey celestial patterns far beyond the capacity of the cultures to which they are attributed? Whenever evidence emerges about the alleged portal discovered in the Himalayas in 1936, the reaction of major institutions follows a predictable pattern: deny, divert, and silence. Religious organizations, such as the Catholic Church and academic centers tied to European and American universities, have never acknowledged any concrete evidence, even in the face of persistent reports. This behavior raises a central question: what could be so dangerous that it forces global elites to hide information of this kind? There are precedents that reinforce this logic. In 1975, for example, when Italian archaeologists requested access to sealed underground chambers beneath St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican refused, even with international scientific backing. Another emblematic case occurred in 1960, when Moscow University attempted to publish reports about unusual underground structures in the Ural Mountains. But the documents were classified by the Soviet government, resurfacing only after the fall of the USSR. In the scientific field, cases of censored science are also abundant. One example is the 1969 study by geologist J. Jake Stipp from the University of Miami, which suggested much older ages for archaeological sites in Mexico than the accepted chronology. The article was rejected by major academic journals without clear justification. In the case of the Himalayas, unverified records mention that internal reports from the Royal Geographical Society were filed with the note "Do not disclose," a practice that repeated itself in other sensitive discoveries. Why would institutions that claim to be committed to scientific and historical truth adopt silence? Were they only protecting their credibility, or concealing an alternative history that could shake power structures? If global elites fear that knowledge about portals, ancient symbols, and mysterious astronomy comes to light, it means such hidden discoveries have real potential to change humanity's perception. What would happen if it were confirmed that past civilizations possessed ancestral wisdom far superior to what is officially recognized? Why do the same circles of power that control military, religious, and scientific archives seem to act in unison to prevent public access to this information? If nothing existed, why the continuous effort to deny, censor, and silence? If the entrance truly exists, as suggested by declassified military documents, reports from Tibetan explorers, and ancient maps aligned with stars, then we are not dealing with a simple rock formation in the Himalayas, but with something that could redefine the entire narrative of civilization. Unverified sources describe the door as being made of perfectly fitted blocks, similar to the techniques used in Inca constructions and also in the ruins of Pumapunku in Bolivia, known for their inexplicable millimetric cuts, even today. This opens the possibility of a direct connection between peoples separated by continents, supporting the hypothesis of a global network of ancestral knowledge. What could lie behind this structure? Some independent researchers argue that it is the remains of a lost civilization, comparable to the mythical Atlantis, whose knowledge would have been suppressed to maintain the official version of history. Others point to the possibility of advanced technology, perhaps linked to electromagnetic fields or to knowledge of mysterious astronomy, which would explain why ancient maps and Buddhist records associate the site with celestial gates. Related cases reinforce the mystery. In 2003, excavations in Peru revealed the Hayu Marca portal, known as the Gate of the Gods, a monolithic structure considered by locals to be a passage to another dimension. In 1997, a group of Chinese archaeologists found in Qinghai a cave sealed by metallic pipes embedded in the rock, a fact documented by the Xinhua news agency but quickly classified as scientifically irrelevant. These parallels indicate that portals and sealed passages appear in various cultures, always accompanied by narratives of censorship or institutional silence. If the Himalayas conceal something similar, we may be facing a secret that directly connects humanity, the cosmos, and ancestral wisdom. Why would the great powers have an interest in keeping such a place inaccessible to this day? What could happen if that door were finally opened? Would it reveal ruins of a forgotten civilization, a technology that defies the known laws of physics, or even a cosmic connection capable of shaking current power structures? If part of humanity's past has been deliberately erased, what exactly has been hidden behind this sealed door, and how far are we willing to investigate? In the face of so many documents, reports, and historical parallels, the question remains, what was really found in the Himalayas in 1936? If that portal is there, does it represent only forgotten ruins or a direct access to knowledge that has been systematically hidden from humanity? How many other hidden discoveries remain buried in secret archives, far from the public eye? If ancient civilizations already possessed ancestral wisdom connected to the stars and mastered techniques we still do not understand, what does that say about the true origin of humanity? Now, I want to hear from you. If you could open that sealed door, would you do it, even at the risk of changing everything we know about history? Or do you believe that certain secrets should remain untouched? Leave your theory in the comments, because each perspective may be the missing piece of this puzzle. And if you want to keep following investigations that question official narratives and explore ancient mysteries, forbidden archaeology, and mysterious astronomy, subscribe to the channel now and activate notifications. The next revelations may be even more surprising than you imagine.